ethics. So we'll look at several things about secular ethics. But the class is scheduled from 7:30 to 8:30. But because of the war and the conflict in Israel and Gaza and also in Ukraine, then this week I've started leading sutra reading to as a to create cause for peace, and pray for peace in the region. So we've scheduled that every evening from 8 to 8:45. So we'll stop a little before 8, and then if you like, you can leave, or if you like, you can stay. Either way, and then we'll do sutra reading until 8:45. Yeah, yeah. But did you have another question? Are you okay? Oh yeah, you were saying you have difficulty with karma and rebirth. Oh, because in Catholicism they don't have that. Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Cathars? Yeah, that the mind carries on to another life. No, I struggled with that for a long time. Yeah. Right. Right. In the Christian worldview or all the Abrahamic religions, after we die, it's not like the mind stops. The person we carry on and either go to a good place or a bad place or somewhere in between. Um, so that part's already quite different than a like a scientific materialism point of view, where the mind completely depends upon the body. And so when the brain dies, then there is no more person. Many people. Yeah, many people. That's it. You're over. It's over. Many people think that. Yeah. So already just having the view that there's some kind of future existence is already halfway there. But then I think it just, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to think about. I mean, it involves kind of, well, what are we as a person? What is the mind? Um, is the mind reducible to matter? So that would be a materialistic view. But it seems like, when we have a sense, like there's a famous essay by a philosopher, Nagel, I believe. I think it's Robert. I'm not sure, but it's called what it's like to be a bat. What it is like to be a bat, meaning that he's saying, like imagine what it's like to be a bat. That they have a particular experience of the world, that's completely different from ours because they don't have visual perception. They use sonar, but they have an experience of a world, and that experience that they have is something that exists, and that something is not physical. It's something that exists and it's not physical. Essentially, that's all he's arguing. So that and that something that it is, that it's like to be about, just like for us, what it is to be a person, what it is to feel love, what it is to feel sadness. That's something that exists, and it's not something material. No matter how much you look at different molecules and atoms and wavelengths or something, you can't find that thing. So essentially, that's something, a consciousness. So that comes quite close to what the Buddhists are saying, like why there is reincarnation, is because the consciousness and any moment of consciousness is part of a stream of consciousness. The moments that came before, moments that are produced from that moment that come after. And that stream of consciousness is not something physical. And because it's fundamentally not physical, it's also not produced. Its main cause is not something physical. Its main cause can only be something like it. So therefore, the main cause of any moment of consciousness is a previous moment of consciousness. Therefore, we at the first moment of conception or a first moment of conscious experience in this life as an embryo at some point, if not at conception, then the cause for that had to be a previous moment of consciousness. So that's why there's past lives. And then the similar is same for future lives. Yeah, that's the main kind of reason, is that consciousness is its fundamental, its kind of own sort of substance, and nothing physical can produce that, right? Although, of course, physical events, correlate with different experiences, but well, yeah, but then they're combined, but they're not the same thing. They're interacting at a very subtle level, extremely, yeah. Which is also why if we damage part of the brain, it impairs our cognitive ability in different ways, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. especially physicists. Physicists are the most kind of open-minded. There's a whole bunch of prominent physicists who, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago signed a letter saying, I mean, because looking at quantum mechanics, that consciousness must be a fundamental property in the universe to explain. Yeah, exactly. What is a primary thing in the universe? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, I know. That's why, yeah, it's so exciting. Is you're shocked. Quantum mechanic physicists saying that there must be consciousness as something different from matter is strange. Someone's writing. There's a lot going on in the chat here now. Oh, that's you. Okay. Oh, because they can't hear the audience speaking. Right, right. Always forget. Right. Okay, great. Yeah, yeah, good. But another whole body of evidence for, thinking about whether past and future lives exist, because it's true. For karma to exist, there has to be past and future lives. If you can't accept past and future lives, karma doesn't, it doesn't really make any sense. It just becomes a kind of watered down idea. Yeah, in which there are some karmas that, function in this life, but it waters down the whole idea of like what it really is. It becomes something much less profound than what the Buddha, meant. But another whole body of research is children who remember previous lives. Children, yeah, young children. There's this, it's an anomalous phenomena among people because most people don't. But there's a whole body of evidence of research, mainly by Ian Stevenson at University of Virginia, and his current protege is Jim Tucker, in the same seat. It's actually a seat sponsored by, it's endowed by one wealthy individual from Tennessee who developed Xerox, the technology for Xerox machines, the photocopy. Yeah, he was interested in this kind of anomalous phenomena, so he endowed Ian Stevenson, who was a psychologist at UVA, to start doing research, and then he researched something like 20, like no, 2,000 different cases of children who have memories, and he's not doesn't have any religious, what do you say, like agenda at all. He's just a very skeptical, unbiased kind of scientist, interested in this phenomena of children who they identify with someone who was died before they were born. They have memories that it's difficult to explain how that child could possibly have because there's no connection, and they even have personality traits that match, that like children who some remember a person who died by drowning. Oftentimes they have a phobia of water. And then, I mean, the fascinating one that Stevenson focused on towards the end of his life is some even have birthmarks to correlate with their memories. Like if they died with a gun wound, like to the neck, some who have a memory of a person who died with it, they have a birthmark there, which is really, even Buddhists, we don't have an explanation for that. That's really difficult. Yeah. Yeah. So that also, if you read that, some of that research, it's really persuasive to think like this is a real thing. It's not just some religious-y kind of idea. You raised your hand earlier. No? Yeah. Oh, is it the medical school? I didn't really. I don't know. Is the Department of Psychology usually part of the medical school? Yeah. Oh, 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 yeah. I'd be curious to know. I should check. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and start. So, yeah, let's just generate a positive motivation for this session on secular ethics. So, thinking again, why we're here. Basically, I mean, secular ethics is, um, I mean, I heard about it primarily from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, um, but and his main concern for speaking about, writing about, promoting secular ethics is that, um, yeah, in the world, so many problems that we have are man-made problems. Um, and the human race exists on such a, well, on such a great scale now in the Earth. It's on the planet Earth. It's not like we're just a minor force anymore. We're a major force and we create, depending on what we do, it affects the entire environment and the entire human kind of family in profound ways. And in the past, it's been difficult to cooperate and work together as an entire like human race, human family, because of differences in religious beliefs, um, political beliefs, um, yeah, uh, uh, yeah, ethnic, racial beliefs, and identities, identifying in very different ways. So his idea is that it's important to find sort of a common ground that we all share. That's a basis for having universal concern, respect, concern for one another, and becomes a basis then for working together to solve global problems on one hand, and also just improve the quality of everyone's life as individuals. Anyway, so yeah, we can use that, I think, as a basis to generate positive motivation, thinking personally, what might we want to gain from engaging in this session on secular ethics, and then what might we want to, what would we like to, yeah, bring about in the world at large for countless others through this session. So in that way, generate a sort of positive motivation. Mhm. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot to say again, and but I'll just try to touch on some of the main points. So generally, the structure I have in mind for um, the my talk tonight is looking at a bit more of the reasons why secular ethics is important at this time. Then what is secular ethics specifically, and then um, how to sort of train as an individual. How can a person train in secular ethics? And then and how that's related. We'll sort of actually not only train in secular ethics, but what's the basis for secular ethics? And then how to train in that and how that's related to education. Then how secular ethics is related to improving education and training, future generations to have a more compassionate and healthy um, whole sort of people and society. Mm. So the whole idea, I mean, well, actually, I thought previously, I thought secular ethics was a phrase like His Holiness the Dalai Lama made up, or that he created and promoted. But actually, it's not. It predates His Holiness by a long ways. I was just reading. There's a Wikipedia page about secular ethics that I learned this from today. Um, Actually, it's an idea that's much older than His Holiness. Um, it goes back. I mean, it has precedence in Western philosophy, especially there's like among English philosophers, there's a kind of secular humanism. I don't remember the names of the main philosophers who promoted that, but and other European philosophers also. There's a sort of idea of, well, ethics from the Enlightenment, when thinkers wanted to find reasons for believing things that are not related to religion, not based in religion, but rather based in their own empirical observations and scientific kind of method. Then philosophers also wanted to find a basis for ethics that's also not based in religion. That's a sort of ethical um, framework or um, kind of ideas about how to be a moral person, how to lead a good life. That's not well, that's derived from just basic observations that we can make as ordinary human beings, not derived from like the word of a deity or God or creator. But even in ancient Indian philosophy, apparently, this I want to look into more, but there's some ancient Indian philosophers who had a similar idea. Um, yeah. about deriving ethics from looking at our basic human condition, using that as a basis. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama, this is since he's been giving teachings and talks in the West, this is something he's been very close to his heart. Um, and his reasons for promoting secular ethics are more along the lines, well, of looking at he says, basically, if we look at, as individuals, as communities, as, countries, as in a global population, we have problems at different levels, personal problems, community problems, global problems. And we can divide the problems into two types. Those which are naturally occurring, like, earthquakes, volcanoes exploding, tsunamis, natural disasters, which we can't really do that much about. We can prepare for those and try to ameliorate the way they negatively affect us, but it's not like we can stop earthquakes from happening or stop tsunamis or stop major storms from happening. They're going to happen, right? But then there's natural problems that are naturally occurring due to the elements in the environment. But then there's also man-made problems. Right? There's a lot of man-made problems. So like wars, man-made problem. Interpersonal conflicts between people. I mean, violence, murder, violence, poverty. Largely man-made problems. So those, because, as human beings we've created, we can also resolve. We can find solutions to those, or at least we can work towards. We can reduce. And the framework is that, the idea is that, well, we begin at a personal level, because we can, if even if we can't change others, we can change ourselves. So, and then at a personal level, we try not to harm others and try to benefit others as much as we can. And then if we can do that on a personal level, then we can become a resource for others around us and our family, friends, and help them also to change in positive ways. And then if, as a family, starting with the family unit, basically, if we can create a more healthy, wholesome, happy family, then that becomes a powerful force in the community. And then if community becomes more happy, free from suffering, working together better, then they become, force in the country and outward like that. So, but the unit as human beings, the unit we have to start with is our minds, ourselves as individuals, and then in that, each moment of awareness, each moment we make decisions about how to think, how to speak, how to use our bodies, and then what to do with our lives, and that makes a difference, right? Think about like a war. Wars can, like say the First World War started with, one murder of some Austrian person, though, can start with one conflict between two people. But wars are something clearly made by humans. It's not like, and it's a group of humans, together decide, to do that. Like think Hamas attack on Israel, it probably started one person, had an idea, and then they talked to other people, and then many people agree, yes, that's a good idea. Like why? I don't know, but then they convince, thousands of people that that's a good idea, and then so things start, small, and then they have an effect on others. So yeah, so His Holiness idea, all the problems in the world can be divided into, kind of naturally arising in the physical environment and man-made problems. So man-made problems we can do something about. And then if we look at the nature of man-made problems, and another reason is that, in the distant past, say like 2,000 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, then, humans, the human population was much less, and the scale of human sort of, physical presence in the world was much less. Like nature used to be a huge force. Like you read about the sutras and the Buddhist sutras, then, it's like the jungles are these huge, scary places full of wild animals. And the human dwellings are just, sporadic places kind of scattered throughout that. But to go from one to the other, you have to go through these big wild areas. Like in the United States, also in the past, I'm from Virginia, right? It was one of the original 13 colonies. so we study a lot in history about the first colonists who came. The first colonists who came, they just have this fort on this little island, Jamestown Island, which is very nearby. I could ride my bicycle from there to there from where I grew up. I did many times. But it's like, and the first winter they had, they almost all died because they hadn't grown enough food and saved up enough food. Actually, the Indians, the Native American Indians, saved them, gave them food to survive through the winter. Um, but nature used to be this huge, vast force, and humans are just very small within it. So whatever humans do, it seems to have not that big of an impact. But now the scale is completely changed, where the human population has grown immensely, and our power in terms of technological ability and power, and our power to reshape the environment is incredibly strong. So now it's like, if we want, we could with nuclear weapons, we could destroy the world like many times over. Even without that, if we keep dumping carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, it's going to totally, reshape the environment. Also, like I was saying last week, the production of plastics. What is it? Geologists call this. I think they've made it official now. The Anthropocene. Do you know about that? I think it's official now. They call this geological age, the age of humans. Because if you look at like the sedimentary, what do you call? What's that called? When they look at layers of sediment in the earth and say, oh, there's this era and this era and this era according to what happened. Yeah, the deposits, but kind of the history that story that tells, like, millions of years in the future, if people look at the sedimentary layer that's being created, like from, 500 years ago till now, they'll be like, oh, that was humans kind of shaped that. Humans were the prime force in creating that, which means it has a lot of smoke and plastic stuff in it, right? I mean, human remains of human-made materials, right? So, yeah. So the point is that humans are an incredible force in the world now. So it makes a big difference. And technology is like neutral. Whether technology is good or bad depends on how we use it. Depends on the mind of the person who uses the technology. So, one, because humans are such a powerful force in the world now, and also because we're more interconnected than ever before. And so the problems we have are really global problems, whereas we never had quite that before. So the climate change, it's a global problem. No one country can solve that problem. But yet if one country, each country as they contribute to that problem, like I was saying last week, the United States has contributed one of the most in the world. That greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, it affects everyone in the whole globe, right? Plastics, or being in the oceans affects everyone. We need more human cooperation on a global scale than ever before in order to resolve global crisis, right? Another one is the whole nuclear proliferation. Another one is economies. Our economies are more interlinked now than, as we saw during the pandemic. We realized, we need to stop outsourcing all of our making medical masks to China. Because what if we can't trade anymore and then we don't have any? Remember that crisis at the beginning of the pandemic? And making, chips, computer chips. So our industries now and our economies are more interlinked than ever before, so that economic downturn in one country, it affects all the other countries in the world. Also transportation, we move between countries more than ever before. Also communication, we can communicate now with anyone in the world in just, seconds, like never before. So we also know what's happening with other other countries, other people all around the world, and we can affect, just like Russia being, in 2016, Russia, meddling through social media in the messaging around the U.S. elections. It had a huge effect, which is something that never happened before. So that shows again, it's like we might think, well, what do I care what, how the Russian government kind of regulates their, the internet usage of their people, or how they use the internet. But then if it's directly affecting our elections, it becomes a big issue. So it's like we need to be more concerned about, people all around the world, more than ever before because we affect each other more than ever before. And because we have this power to do really good things or to do really destructive things, like more than ever before, which is a dangerous thing, you know. Um, um, so, so then, in light of all that, then His Holiness is saying, we need a secular ethics. Like in the past, when we lived in our own isolated community, our own life, and we have our own religious beliefs that are different from anyone else in the world. That's fine and good, and it doesn't because we don't as a community we don't interact with other people that much. Then what we believe, if it works for us, then that's fine. It doesn't matter if other people don't believe that or not. But now, looking at, trying to act together as a global community, we really need a basis for ethical beliefs that everyone can relate to and everyone can believe in, um, and that are meaningful to everyone. So we need a basis for a set of ethics, moral behavior, distinguish between what's good and what's bad in terms of our behavior that isn't derived from religious beliefs that exclude some, that are relevant to some but exclude others, right? So in the world, I mean, again, people have ethical beliefs. You can divide between those who are religious and those who are atheist or agnostic. And then the religions, you have the different major religions, but there's largely those who have believe in a creator God and those who don't, which is Buddhism and Jainism. Um, but but whatever the case, they have very different stories about what the creator God is. Um, and then even if you try to, even if you try to derive ethics from Buddhism and Jainism, which don't assert a creator God, but they assert karma, which entails belief in past and future lives, which for many people they won't believe, right? So you also can't use that as a basis, right? So that's whenever you hear His Holiness speak about secular ethics, and generally when His Holiness gives public advice, he doesn't speak about past and future lives because he wants what he's talking about to be relevant for everyone. And that, speaking about past and future lives already for many people, they think, oh, that's just kind of a superstitious belief, and it undermines the credibility of the speaker. Um, so yeah, so His Holiness' idea that we need to look, yeah, for a basis for secular, for a basis for ethical, for treating others well, and shaping our kind of ethical outlook. That's not related to religion, but rather is based in, His Holiness will say, like common sense, looking at our nature as human beings, and also science, looking at scientific findings about what's good for human flourishing and what's destructive for human flourishing. So yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting in that Wikipedia page I was looking at about secular ethics. It had some examples of like secular ethical um, kind of um, what do you call like in a military they had like a code of ethics. Like when you enter West Point Academy actually was one of the examples given. But many of them were from the military, different military. Like the Navy has a sort of code of ethics. Like the medical school, when you become a doctor, you have to take what is it that Heraclitus or high, high, high what's the ancient Greek anyway, there's a code of ethics all the way from the ancient Greeks in medicine that you have to agree to abide by. Yeah, but several from the military. But they're mostly things that they're in common with the major religions, like don't kill, you won't steal, won't lie, don't cheat, things like that. Um, yeah, similar to the commandments, but yeah, but the commandments were given by God to Moses so that we should follow them. But you have to find a basis that's not to do with God. So why don't I show this? I have a few yeah, the Hippocratic Oath. Thank you. I have a few graphics, just three graphics I want to share. So the first is this. Yeah. Yeah. This is just comparing religious ethics versus secular ethics. So this is probably basically what I went through, but in a little different language. So the roots of ethics. There's either religious ethics based on a theistic understanding of the world generally, and what is real, true, or good is defined by God, right? Um, whereas versus secular ethics, which is based on a scientific understanding of the world. So kind of like an empirical, using common sense, what we can see around us. Um, and then reality, truth, and goodness do not depend on the existence of a God, but rather depend upon, observation of what seems to be true. So the primary difference is in how values are justified. So they're justified by either our own, direct observation, in the case of secular ethics, or they're justified by religious beliefs and because it's somehow sacred, because it's given by a God, in the case of religious ethics. So that's the main difference. So then the next question is, okay, well, that's all well and good, but then if we're going to adopt secular ethics, well, what are the fundamental observations, and facts about the reality that we see that are the basis, become the basis for our ethics? Like, how do we build that up, right? So here is where His Holiness probably has the most to add, the most to say. Um, yeah. So some of the main points His Holiness makes is that, um, well, basically, as human beings, and yeah, as sentient beings. So sentient beings again means a person who has a mind and is not enlightened, right? So if you look at a person, any person has a mind, has a consciousness, and then those who have already become fully enlightened, those are Buddhas, and then the rest are all sentient beings, right? So all of us are sentient beings. But sentient beings includes not only humans, also animals, and then any other kinds of beings who might exist, spirits or hell beings or, a god, beings in a god realm or something. Whatever being that has a mind and is also not enlightened is a sentient being. So in Buddhism, one fundamental observation is that, um, all sentient beings, they have a natural wish to be happy and to flourish, and a wish to be free from harm and free from suffering. So we take that. So His Holiness suggests that that can be the basis for secular ethics. Just recognizing that fundamental nature that all beings who have a mind, all sentient beings have, that they all want to flourish and have well-being and happiness, and we all want to be free from suffering. From the tiniest insect, a single-celled animal, then what form does that take? It takes the form of that, when they perceive that there might be food that can nourish their bodies, they're attracted to that. They go towards that. They move to it and try to get it to sustain their life. And when they perceive something that might threaten them and harm their life and kill them even or eat them, then they're afraid and they move away from that. So we all have that same kind of fundamental instinct that when we perceive something that might make us happy, might benefit our body, benefit our mind, bring us enjoyment as kind of flourishing, then we're attracted to that, and we feel pleasure when we see that or when we can experience that, and so we want that. And when we perceive something else that might harm us, that might make us feel bad, might harm our body, then that causes fear and aversion, and we want to get away from that. So no matter how simple or complex an animal or a person is, that we all have that fundamental nature that we want support, we want sustenance, we want things that we want safety, and we want kind of nourishment, physical and emotional and mental nourishment, and the desire for that is an expression of our desire for happiness. So when we talk about happiness, it doesn't just mean like, oh, I'm laughing, I'm having fun. It means all those things, kind of flourishing of our physical and our emotional and our mental kind of being. So we all have a natural desire for that and to be free from harm, things that destroy that, right? So looking at that as a fundamental truth, and that's not, science can, has a lot to say about that, but that also doesn't require any scientific understanding. It's just basic common sense. You look around, you can see that's true of beings. But it can be very powerful to meditate on, to think about more deeply. which yeah. So maybe we'll do a little later. Mm. Yeah. So maybe I'll show the next graphic, and then I'll remember what I'm going to say next too. So this is by just a quote by this scholar now, thinker, yeah, very popular thinker scholar now, Yuval Noah Harari, is an Israeli scholar. You might have heard. There's this book called uh, Hominids, I believe. Um, yeah, it's kind of he wrote a book is like a New York Times bestseller, probably 10 years or so ago. It's kind of this. It's like a brief history of the development of humans and how human beings on Earth and how that's related to. He has this very broad, perspective looking at how did human beings evolve such that we developed the kind of economic systems, political systems, religious belief systems that we have now. Um, and so, but I mean, he's a historian basically, but he's also just a dynamic thinker, thinking about many different issues. So, like if you look on YouTube, there are a lot of interviews. Like he has a couple TED talks and interviews, and yeah, he's a very interesting person to listen to. He's also Buddhist. He's a meditator. I think more Vipassana meditation he does, but huh? Yeah, yeah. Can you look up that book, Ram? Do you mind? You've all know Harari. Yeah, his bestseller. He has a couple books, but there's one more famous one. Anyway, so he says here, secular ethics relies. Oh, what happened? Oh, sorry. There he is. Yeah, there's his photo. Okay, yeah. Okay, secular ethics relies not on obeying the edicts of this or that God, right? So again, but rather on a deep appreciation of suffering. So he connects secular ethics, which is like his holiness, to on the understanding of suffering. So what does that mean? Basically, what does it mean that how do we base the ethics on this fundamental observation that we have suffering and we don't want to suffer, um, and we have some happiness, but there's a lot of happiness we don't have that we want. Um, so we need things to bring us happiness. Basically, it ties back to the golden rule. If as an individual, the more as an individual we are aware of how we want happiness and we don't want suffering, we want to be free from suffering, then that engenders in us understanding of others, how other people, from our parents, our siblings, our family members, to friends, even strangers, even people we dislike, how they have that same nature, right? So just stopping to be aware of that about ourselves helps us understand others much more deeply, right? And that's something that transcends our differences and different ethnic identity, different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, um, different language, different culture. Just recognizing that fundamental nature that we have, that we want to have happiness and be free from suffering. Already, and the more deeply we're aware of that, the more deeply kind of we already have a very rich basic understanding of what other people are and what's important to them. And then because we don't want to suffer, it means, like I was saying earlier, we don't want to be harmed. So if we so in our personal ethics is, well, in relation to other, well, how should you treat me? You should not harm me, first of all. And then if you can help me, that's great. Right? So then that's how we should treat other people, right? Then our ethics should basically be we don't harm others in any way whatsoever, because just like we wouldn't want to be harmed, and we benefit others, as much as possible. So that's also found in the Bible. I forget which. It's in one of the Gospels. It's in the New Gospel. It's the Golden Rule. It's how thou shalt treat others as you would have others treat you. Basically, is the rule. Also, it's found in Western ancient Greek philosopher, Western philosophers like Kant. It's very similar to Kant's um, categorical imperative, it's called, which is more of the idea that whatever action we should take, we should be able to or whatever the principle maybe is more important, the principle according to which we act. If we imagine that everybody were to act according to that same principle, would that make the world better or worse? Yeah, that's a good idea, right? So, so this is yeah, kind of similar to that. Um, mm. And then also, so then, um, yeah, and then also another point is Holiness makes. Maybe this is the last one, and then I'll move on to some other things. Is that biologically, we depend upon human affection and care, well, especially as being mammals, and then as being with a complex mind, complex social structure, and because of the nature of our bodies, as human infants are totally helpless. If you leave an infant child just out in the wild, they'll die within a few days. They need protection, and they need food from their mother, and their mother's breast milk generally is what um, their lives are sustained on, right? I mean, all of our lives as infants, that's how we all started, right? As infants, um, we need protection, to be clothed, fed, cleaned, for you know for several years, right at the beginning of our lives. And that, why do our kind mother, our father, they give us when they give us care, it's not just like a machine just taking care of something. They do so with much love and affection. And actually, there's studies that show. I mean, and also again, it's just common sense. You don't need studies so much. That when a baby sees the smiling of their mother face, they feel happy. And that happiness causes the brain cells then to grow. It causes development of the brain. If children are left, like there's a classic incident, I think it was in Romania, at some point there was like this massive civil war where a lot of parents died, so there were tons of orphans. I think it was Romania. There was so then there so it was a situation where there was lots and lots of orphans living in small babies living in an orphanage, being with just a few caretakers, like one caretaker for every 20 or 30 children, you know. So, but infant children who grew up in that environment where they don't have the touch, and love and singing and smiling face and personal attention, their the brain development the brain develops in a way which it's like they don't experience emotions. They don't have the capacity their own to feel emotions because they don't like have that emotional contact with a human being as they're growing up in infancy. And so they themselves are emotionally like dead, like very cold. And so they don't have empathy. So they don't know what other emotions other people feel. So then they easily become very violent, you know? When they're harmed or when they're afraid or when they're threatened. They easily harm others because they don't have a sense of how that's wrong, right? Because they don't have empathy. They don't have a sense of how harming others makes them feel. So as human beings, our biological nature is that such to fully develop in a healthy way, we need this intimate contact with, just for our very survival, with and caring, loving, tender, emotional contact with another human being to develop. So our very lives are very, evolutionarily, the biology of our bodies and our brains, um, is also like, it's like with our immune system. When we're happy and we feel that others care about us, we can feel like our immune system is stronger. If we feel lonely, and it's measurable, right? If you feel really lonely and like nobody cares about us, we feel sad. And when we feel sad, our immune system is weaker. We're more susceptible to disease. Um, so you can see how receiving kindness from others, support, um, affection, and having a feeling of being connected with others, it's intimately related to our happiness and well-being, and that's related to our health, our physical health. Whereas being disconnected from others, being in competition with others, feeling threatened by others, and feeling disconnected, alone, is all related to sadness, um, which then gives rise to many other anger, resentment, jealousy, um, arrogant pride, and then also depression, and is all related to physically being unhealthy. Um, so for that reason, So that's like kind of a scientific basis for again ethics. That as an ethical person means essentially we don't harm others because of all those reasons, and we should try to benefit others as much as we can. Mm. So that's why it's not just a shallow appreciation of suffering, but a deep appreciation of. It's not only suffering. I think suffering and happiness. Um, mm. So I mean, you could. I mean, try to imagine some of the different world problems that exist in 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 the local community or at the level of the country, um, at the level of the continent or the globe. Um, yeah, you can see how. I don't know. Try to think of some examples. I'll ask you in the audience for some examples. I'll try to think of some for a moment where you think this kind of if people had a stronger sense of the secular ethics, um, that it might help to resolve or avoid some kind of problems. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, governments. Well, also, I mean, private industry can create a lot of problems now, like pollution. Like I was saying that example from when I was growing up. Think of a factory owner who's just dumping pollutants into a river, that many people use downstream. It just shows kind of a lack of concern about, you know. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, yeah, it's true. It's true. Most places that I mean, the people are good. Yeah, most people are really good people. It's true. Yeah. But then there's the few that are, I mean, that aren't. And so it's like, how do you make sure they're all good? Or how can you increase? Like in the US, we have this huge problem of gun violence and massacres. I mean, and this whole, I mean, when I was growing up, you'd never hear of like one person going heavily armed into like a concert and just shooting people. Like it's unheard of. Even the airport security, it was so relaxed, before because you didn't have people like, trying to bomb the planes. But now it's like it's so common in the US, especially school shootings. I mean, schools. Mm. Yeah, but it's more per capita now. I mean, for sure. But also, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of different reasons. The whole drug problem and drugs are thing, and loneliness and broken families, and just people being more and more lonely. Communities being less connected, probably people being less connected in a healthy way than before. Yes. Mm, true. Yeah. Yeah, and also, I mean, having ill will, like, what's the benefit for you? It makes you unhappy. And does it help change the other person's behavior? No, it's more likely to make them have more ill will towards you. Huh? So there's no benefit. Yeah, yeah, mm, yeah. It's gonna make you miserable. No? If you grasp at that. Yeah, yeah, Yeah. Yeah, but that's where, so that, yeah, that's a good segue to our next, um, the next kind of segment of talking about secular ethics. Is this, so then Holiness is saying, well, to promote secular ethics, most of us, by the time we're adults, like we're not going to change that much. But children are very malleable still. Malleable, I mean, they're still formative. So, um, not that we can't change as adults, because we can, but it's really important in, I mean, if we want to change our society, we need to change our education, the way we educate the future, members of our society, citizens of our society. And so His Holiness in promoting, because, also another factor here is like kind of like the death of religion in the world. I mean, it used to be that most people would turn to their church. You go to church on Sunday, you go to Sunday school, you meet with your, you have a quite close-knit like religious community through your church or your synagogue or your mosque or whatever, and that provides the underpinnings for your secular approach to life. And generally that's very healthy and works for many people, and that's not something that's irrelevant or something now. It's just that for many people, it's just not, well, personally, they don't, that whole network is, well, they're not part of a religious network anymore. And then also there's a problem that many people really are skeptical about any religion because religious beliefs have led to so many conflicts in the history of humankind. Um, so that's another reason for secular ethics. But 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 so now it's like, well, we need a new source for moral education, right? And that also, if it's going to be something in schools, then it has to be also not connected with a religion. In a place like the U.S., for sure, but also there's a scientific basis. But to have healthy human beings. So this relates to this book I mentioned before, Emotional Intelligence. There was this idea that education should be all about learning facts and skills and sort of intellectual um, ability, logical reasoning ability. But actually, that doesn't make a person whole. To be a whole person, you also need to have, you need to have emotional wisdom, where you yourself understand your own emotions and you have self-control when you experience, even if, no matter how brilliant a scientist or like a doctor you are, if you go off into a flying rage all the time, no one wants to work with you and you won't have a successful career, right? So, um, just to work with others together, we need to have these things: self-awareness. We need to be aware of our own emotional kind of life persona, and then we need to have emotional self-management. We need to be able to work with our different emotions to go through different challenges in life, and then that gives rise to empathy, understanding of others, and being able to connect and communicate with others. So empathy, understanding other people's emotional experience, and that gives rise to better communication, being able to communicate with others effectively. And then that gives rise to working more effectively in society and being able to do good things. So, um, so here you see in this chart, I just want to go through, we just have a few minutes left, but actually we have 1 minute left. No, actually we're 1 minute now. We have no minutes left. Anyway, I'll just go through this chart briefly. So this is what I was pointing about earlier. Change happens at a level of personal and individual, and then upwards to social, the people they're connected with, and upwards to an entire system of a country or government, right? And then different awareness dimensions of like those. So this is called C learning, social, emotional, and ethical learning. So this is part of the whole curriculum that His Holiness helped develop for schools, which is it's science, it's a research-based kind of educational curriculum for learning about emotions and ethics. So the personal level starts with awareness, attention, and self-awareness. So by like learning about mindfulness, learning about, yeah, being mindful of what one's feeling, and then also learning a language of emotions, to be able to identify different emotions, positive, constructive emotions versus negative, destructive emotions. Then just having a language to speak about and understanding of those, it helps you see when those are arising in your own mind and make more deliberate decisions about, do I want to follow this anger and jealousy, or do I want to recognize that that's something that's going to bring problems? And then how can I change that and develop a more so then also self-compassion, to recognize that we have suffering. And then when we have suffering, recognize how to deal with it in a constructive way, self-regulation. So that gives rise to So personal awareness, better self-awareness, gives rise to interpersonal awareness, being more aware of what others are experiencing. And then that gives rise to more compassion for others. And that gives rise to treating others better and having more skill in the way we relate with others, right? And then on a system level, so that gives rise to appreciating interdependence, this wider kind of networks of interdependence, and then recognizing our common humanity, how even people from very different cultures, different language, different religion are fundamentally the same. And then that gives rise to community and global engagement, right? So these are some of the kind of main things in this sea learning. But actually, it's related to a kind of broader field of programs for children for learning about emotions, self-regulation, conflict resolution. Um, that's called social and emotional learning. Yeah, and there's a whole huge body of research about these kind of programs that show how beneficial it is for children's happiness, their enjoyment of being in school, their their academic performance, their ability to resolve conflicts with other students, the improved kind of atmosphere in the classroom, um, yeah, and so forth. So that's a little bit about secular ethics. So now we'll break for a few minutes, and then we'll start this sutra reading. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Oh yeah, say